Welcome everybody. How are you today? Welcome back to a TOEFL webinar with E2 Language. My name is Jamal and today we're going to be looking at the first part of the TOEFL speaking test, which are the two independent speaking tasks. So before I go any further, can you just confirm that you can all see and hear me? Okay, wonderful. Okay, how many of you who are here have actually taken the TOEFL before? Just write yes if you have taken the test before and no if you have not. Okay, so there's a bit of a mix. So some of you have never taken the TOEFL before. So we're just going to go through the first two tasks. I'm going to walk you through them. So by the end of this lesson, you should have an idea of what to expect. And for those of you who have taken the test before, this will be a good review and practice for you. So let's get into it. So today, as I said, we're going to be looking at speaking tasks 1 and 2. I'm going to go through a task description where I'm going to explain to you what task 1 and 2 are each about. I'm then going to walk you through the requirements, so what the requirements are, what the expectations are for each of these two speaking tasks. I'm going to then give you a practice. I'm going to give you a speaking question, and I'm going to allow you some time to prepare and practice that. And once that's done, I'm going to let you hear my sample response to those questions. And then by the end of the class, I'm going to give you the evaluation. So how your speaking is going to be evaluated and scored and what the expectations are there. So by the end of this lesson, hopefully you'll understand what you have to do in these two speaking tasks. You'll have completed a practice each, and you'll also understand how they're scored. Before we go any further, you'll need to grab a pen and paper because this lesson is going to require you to plan your response. And in planning your response, you're going to need to write down some notes. So I'll give you a couple of minutes if you don't already have a pen and paper to do so. In the TOEFL test, they're going to give you a pen and paper in your cubicle, and you can use this to take notes for your speaking, for your writing, for your listening, for your reading. It's a very important part of the test. So everyone has a pen and paper? We can move on. So first we're going to look at speaking task 1. So there are 6 TOEFL speaking tasks altogether, and today we're just going to look at 1 and 2. So a brief description of task 1. Task 1 requires you to describe a topic. This topic could be a situation that you've been in or that you're currently in, an experience that you've had related to a memory, or you could be asked to describe a thing such as an object. So you're going to have to use sort of descriptive language. And you will need to use details from your own personal experience. So it's kind of an easy task in the sense that you're drawing on your own memories and your own experiences. And yeah, it shouldn't be too hard for you to be able to do that. The main challenge there is really formulating your answer and using your preparation time to really sort of help you formulate your answer. And we're going to go through that together. But before, let's take a look at the task requirements. So you're given the prompt, which tells you the thing that you have to describe. And then you're given 15 seconds to prepare your response. So what you should do in that 15 seconds is really sort of break down the question. What are they asking you to describe? And write down a few points for each of those things. So your preparation should really be just sort of points and main ideas. You're not going to have time to write a full response or full sentences. Now you have to speak for 45 seconds and it will be timed. And at 45 seconds, your time is going to cut out. Now what you want to try to do is give a full response within that 45 seconds. If you finish a couple of seconds early, it's not a big deal. But if you only speak for 30 seconds, you may get penalized, okay? Because what they're looking for is a full response with a beginning, a clear middle, and an end. So you want to use your planning time to sort of, create a presentation that has a clear beginning, middle, and end. So we get into the practice now. I'm going to give you a sample task 1 speaking topic. So let's take a look at it. Talk about an interesting class you have taken in school and why it stands out in your mind. Include details and examples to support your decision. So you can see that this is a description task because it's asking you to describe a class that you took in school. Now, you have to talk about a few things: describing the class, why it stands out, and use details and examples. So here's the topic or thing you have to describe: an interesting class. You have to say why it stands out. Why was it so interesting for you? And you have to give details and examples to support and explain why it was interesting for you. So here are the kind of 3 things that you have to make sure that you do within that 45 seconds. Introduce the class, explain why it was interesting, and then give some details and examples to support that. So I'm going to give you some preparation time. You should have your pen and paper ready. And I'm going to actually time you. I'm going to give you 15 seconds to prepare your response. So here's the prompt again. And I'm going to start the timer now. Okay, that's it. As you can see, 15 minutes is not a long time. So you really need to do lots of practice with this task in terms of using that 15 minutes wisely. What I would suggest you would do in this case is interesting class. You would write 1 word, for example, math, English, science, whatever the class was. Why it stands out, for example, the teacher or a book that you read. And then some examples, you're just going to have to sometimes also improvise because 15 minutes isn't a long time. Sorry, 15 seconds. I keep saying 15 minutes. 15 seconds. Okay. So now you've done your preparation. I want you now to practice speaking. Okay, obviously I can't hear you, but this is a good opportunity for you to practice speaking within timed conditions. So I'm going to give you 45 seconds to speak your response out loud. And your time starts now. Okay, your time is up. So how did you do? Did you manage to finish within 45 seconds? All right, good, well done. So I'm going to now give you my sample response. So let's just pretend this is me. All right, here goes. When I think back to my high school days, the class that I really loved was English. It was the most interesting class for me because it's where I first discovered Shakespeare. I remember it was 10th grade that my teacher, Mrs. Wickens, first made us read Macbeth. Each day in English class, we would each have a turn at reading part of the book. Mrs. Wickens would then ask us what we each thought of the book, and we would discuss our interpretations. Although Shakespearean language was difficult, the story was so engaging and timeless that it made me want to read more of Shakespeare's work. It was because of that English class that I became a fan. Okay, now I finished perfectly on 45 seconds. So that's going to come with practice. A lot of times we don't know how much 45 seconds feels like. So practicing preparing in 15 seconds and practicing speaking in 45 seconds will really help you prepare for this task. Okay, let's move on to speaking task 2. Let's look at what this task is all about. Now, this task is all about giving your opinion. So you're going to be given a statement or 2 statements, and each one is going to express a different opinion. So you're going to have to choose between those 2 sides, give your opinion, so which side you agree with, and then explain why you think that with details and examples. So what is required of this task? Similar to task 1, you're going to have 15 seconds to prepare your response by writing down main ideas, and you're going to have 45 seconds to speak your response. So let's go into the practice. Here is your sample topic. Some people believe that books and other materials of print are slowly being replaced by the internet, TV, and other media. Others think that there will always be a need for printed material. What do you think and why? Give examples and details in your response. Okay, so let's break this down. Let's look at the first opinion, opinion 1. Some people think that books and other methods of print are slowly being replaced by the internet, TV, and other media. So here we're comparing print with digital media, okay? And the idea is that print is going to be completely replaced. Let's take a look at the second opinion. Others think that there will always be a need for printed material. So this is the other side of the coin, that printed material is not going to die out. It's always going to be part of our culture. Then you have to pick a side. Which one do you agree with? So the question says, what do you think and why? Do you believe that print media is going to die out, or do you believe that there's still going to be a need for it in the future? So you need to say which one you agree with, and you need to explain that with details and examples. So many of you might remember your teachers always telling you it's fine to have an opinion, but you always need to back it up. My teachers always used to tell me that. So you can think what you like, but you have to make sure that you can support that with details, evidence, examples. So that's the important point here. Give examples and details in your response. Okay, it's time to prepare. So pens to paper. You have 15 seconds. Here's your prompt, and your 15 seconds starts now. Okay, time is up. It's now time for you to speak your response. So I'm going to give you 45 seconds to speak out loud. And your time starts now. Okay, time's up. How did you feel about that one? You were able to finish in the required time? Okay, yeah, this one is a little bit trickier because you're having to formulate an opinion and then explain why. So I think a good way of doing this, I'll just go back, is the first thing you need to do is pick a side. Do you think print will survive? Yes or no? If you think no, why not? And it's probably related to technology. So, I mean, the questions that you're going to get here are always going to be related to something that you're familiar with, all right? Something from our culture, from our education, from technology. So it's just a matter of really drawing on all of your ideas. And then good, one student has just said, I had so many ideas that I couldn't finish. So that's another thing. Sometimes you might have too many ideas and you have to really sort of narrow it down. Sometimes we see a question like this and we think, oh, it's such a complex it's such a complex idea. There's so much I could say about it. But it's only 45 seconds, so you really just want to keep it quite simple. So I'll give you an example of my response. Okay. Oh, I'll start the timer. Although I hope that there will always be a need for print media, I believe it will eventually be replaced by digital forms. The digital revolution has changed the way that information is shared and accessed. With the proliferation of smartphones, it means that people no longer have to buy books or newspapers, as they can now access these digitally via the internet. Recent generations, which have grown up with technology, now find books and other printed media obsolete, as digital technology has merged all forms of printed material into one tiny device, where internet and TV can all be accessed. So there's my time. So there I mentioned, the first thing I mentioned was, although I hope that printed media will survive, I believe it will eventually be replaced. There's my opinion, and I stated that in the very beginning. And then I explained why. I said the digital revolution has changed the way that we share information. People don't have to buy printed media anymore, and I gave the examples of books and newspapers. And I said because all of that is now accessible in one place on a smartphone. And so for that reason, technology is going to replace printed media. So it was quite simple. I didn't give huge examples. I didn't give lots of examples. You don't really have a lot of time. All right. So that's another thing in task 2, the opinion one, is really sort of practicing condensing and simplifying your ideas. Before we look at how the independent speaking is evaluated, does anyone have any questions about task 1 or task 2 that we've just looked at? Okay, let's move on. So evaluation. The independent speaking is out of 4. Okay, so everybody, of course, wants to get a 4. So how do we get a 4? Well, we need to speak with a fluid pace. Pace, it means how quickly or how slowly you speak, and how many stops and starts and pauses and ums and ahs you have. So the more you speak quite fluently with less stops and starts, the higher score you're going to get in terms of pace. With pronunciation, they're looking for accurate pronunciation. It should be easy to understand. The examiner shouldn't have to sort of try too hard to listen to try to make sense of the words that you're using. Your language basically your grammar and vocabulary should be effective with only minor errors. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be mostly accurate. Your response should sufficiently address the prompt. That means that you stay on topic and you answer the question precisely. And development means that your response is well developed, so you give enough examples to support your opinion, and that your ideas progress logically, so that you start off by stating your opinion, for example, or stating the thing you're describing, then describing it, explaining why, and then ending it. So it should follow a logical order. What you want to avoid is kind of finishing too early and then having to go back and then fill in the time, because that sort of will affect your development. So speaking with a clear and consistent pace, using accurate pronunciation, grammar and vocabulary, answering the question, so doing what the question asks you to do, and developing your response with examples and explanations. Okay, that brings us to the end of the independent speaking lesson. So today we looked at the first two speaking tasks for the TOEFL test. The first one was description. So you're going to be asked to describe something, an experience, a memory, an object, a person, and you're going to have 15 seconds to prepare and 45 to speak. Task 2 is an opinion. You're going to be given two sides to a story. You're going to have to choose one and explain why you think that with reasons and examples. Again, 15 seconds preparation, 45 seconds of speaking. Now, for those of you who have not done the test before, you will be given headphones that have a microphone attached, and you're going to be actually speaking into the computer. And your response is sent off to a test center where examiners then listen to your response and evaluate it using the criteria that we just looked at. Okay, so yeah, some of you are concerned about the timing. How do you answer the whole question in 45 seconds? I would say you have to practice every day. Try to answer as many questions as you can. You can find sample questions on our website. We have quite a few of them in our TOEFL course, so you can access them from there. Because practice does make perfect, especially in this situation. Learning how to manage your time is really important part of this task. Okay, somebody has asked how many points must we include in our response. Now, it's not that strict in terms of how many points you should include, but what you do need to do is answer all parts of the question. So let's actually go back to the very first slide, the very first task. Oops, this is what I wanted. So you want to make sure that you do all of these three things. Talk about an interesting class, so name the class, and then you can talk about when you had it and where you were when you had it. You can talk about why it stands out. Is it because you made a new friend in that class? Is it because you loved the teacher? And then explain more about it. So as long as you do these three things, then you've met the task response criteria. Now, Edison is asking, what if I only mention the first two things and I don't do this, for example? What if I talk about the class and why it stands out, but I don't give details and examples? Then that would affect the score that looks at the development. So you might do really well in your language, you might do really well in your pronunciation, but it means that your score might you might be penalized in the score that looks at development. So you want to try, again, that's time management. And time management really comes down to practice. I did so many of these before I was able to understand how to manage my time and my response within 45 seconds. And now I don't even have to look at my clock. I kind of have an idea when I'm preparing how long my response is. Now, they do have a timer in the test center, so you can actually see, when your time is going to run out. Now, if you only give one detail and one example, then that's fine, because you don't have a lot of time to go into a lot of detail. It's not a 3-minute presentation. It's only 45 seconds. So one example would be enough, as long as you elaborate that and fill in your time. Okay, guys, yes, this will be uploaded onto YouTube. Last week's writing webinar is now up on YouTube, so you can access that from there. And this will also be put up very shortly. So, okay, Christian, do I need an introduction? It's not a formal introduction, but obviously the first thing that you mention, you're going to be introducing your class. So for this one, my first sentence was, when I think back to my high school days, the class that I really loved was English. In a sense, that is an introduction, because I'm introducing the class. And then I go on, which was English, and then I go on to talk about my English class, why I liked it. Okay. Okay, good. One thing you should avoid, guys, one of you have just mentioned, should you say something like, in this task, I will speak about my favorite class. You can begin your response like that, but it's very typical. And it's nice to sort of make it a little bit more interesting. So when I think back to my high school days, my best memory of high school was English class, rather than today I'm going to talk about the class that I liked the best, which was English. Both of those sentences do the same thing. They're both introducing the topic, but one does so in a more sort of interesting and less formulaic way. Okay, so in relation to language, you want to avoid slang, and it doesn't have to be totally formal, but you don't want to be using sort of language that you would use with your friends. It's kind of more semi-formal when you're speaking for this task. And, the better, more sophisticated vocabulary that you use, obviously, the better that's going to impact on your scores. All right, guys, next week we're going to look at writing again. So join us then, and we're going to be looking at some writing structure tips. So how to structure your essays and how to structure your sentences to write grammatically correct sentences. Thank you very much, everyone. It was a pleasure seeing you, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye.